Dr. Melissa, thank you for joining us on Adulting with Autism.
I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, for all my listeners that's new to you, tell them who you are and what you do.
So, Dr. Melissa Milanak, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, but I also am a keynote speaker, a coach, a consultant. So, I basically get to fly around the world teaching people to sleep better, to stress less, and how to perform at their best while truly enjoying life.
Okay, so why do so many people feel like good sleep is impossible?
I think there are a number of reasons for that. So, for some of us, it's just what society has told us. You snooze, you lose. Time is money. And for the longest time, there was this pressure that if you're not stressed or if you're not tired, it doesn't mean that you're working hard enough or that you're dedicated. And I think a lot of people don't realize that even good things in our life can cause us stress. It could be a move, it could be a life change, it could be a promotion, retirement. And so what happens is when all of this is putting stress and pressure on our bodies and on our systems, now it's harder to rest and to relax. So there's been a lot of this kind of pressure. And I think a lot of people just feel like they don't understand how what they can take control back of their sleep. Some people would just say to me, well, my parents weren't good sleepers and genetically I'm just not going to be a good sleeper. Or they feel like it's hopeless. They don't realize that there are practical things that every person can do to take back control of their sleep.
Now, how does sleep directly impact attention, emotional regulation?
It's really interesting. So when we sleep, we go through different stages of sleep and they make up cycles of sleep and we need all of them. So deep sleep is going to be where our body is healing and repairing itself. And REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, is where our brain heals and repairs itself. So not only is it going to be our brain taking everything that's happened throughout the day and sorting through it, but this is also where the emotion regulation occurs. So if we're not getting the full amount of REM sleep that we need, our fuse is going to be shorter. We're not as resilient. We're maybe not even experiencing joy and happiness as much because of the fact that our brain didn't get that opportunity to heal and repair itself. The way I like to describe it from a learning or a memory or a concentration standpoint is if you take a sponge and you sop up water, you eventually get to the point where it's saturated. You have to squeeze it out before you can take more in. So when we're sleeping and REM sleep is happening, our brain is literally taking all of this and storing what it needs to keep, filtering out what it doesn't need to, and creating more capacity so that we can learn more things, so that we can focus and pay attention. And so that's why we see for so many individuals with neurodivergence, with ADHD, and such that when we're not getting the right amount of sleep, it makes that even harder to focus and to have that concentration.
For the neurodivergent that says, my brain doesn't just shut off, what do you want them to know what's actually happening?
Well, so what's interesting is for individuals that are experiencing many different types of neurodivergence, and over the years, there's all the different terms for this. But what we find is that the way that their body, their circadian rhythm, so circadian rhythm is that thing within our body that helps us to be when we're awake and alert and when we're feeling more tired and sleepy, but it also governs many other factors within our body and our system. And so, with that, we can see up to 80% of people that are experiencing this that have the neurodivergence, and we look at individuals with autism and all different concerns there. Up to 80% of people can be experiencing the insomnia, the circadian rhythm disruptions, the frequent night awakenings, and such. Part of this is because with the way that melatonin is being produced, it's done in an atypical way. And so that can cause melatonin actually is what balances our circadian rhythm and adjusts that phase. And so that's why it can be harder to fall asleep because the way that cortisol and different chemicals and systems are spiking when everyone else's is going down. And so then also if the brain is running and racing, now what happens is that what we need to do is teach the brain how to shut off. And for so many of us, we're go, go, go and busy throughout the day. And it's not until it's time to climb in bed that now we're alone with our thoughts. And our brain needs time to process, but we don't want it to do it when we're in bed. So if we can teach it to unwind before we get in bed, then we stop associating the bed with the place where our brain finally gets to do the thinking that it didn't get to do the rest of the day.
Now, you've seen many clients use strategies that unintentionally make sleep worse. Like, what are the common myths about, like, I know lots of people like taking melatonin and the sleep trackers or catching up on weekends.
So there's a number of different things. The first bit is that a lot of people think that throughout the week they can get less sleep and then they're just going to catch up on the weekend. But we know that it can take up to 4 days to make up for 1 hour of lost sleep. So if you that 2 day weekend is only half of what we need. It's more important to be as consistent with our sleep schedule as we possibly can. Now, realistically, practically, we can't do that every night. There might be reasons why we're up late for travel or work or social events, but we want to start with a set wake time as consistently 7 days a week as we can. Because whenever we go to bed at night, whether we usually go to bed at 10, maybe we go to bed at midnight one night, if we're still waking up at, say, 6 or 7 a.m. every morning, our brain will know, okay, tonight I have 5 hours to work with, or tonight I have 8 hours to work with. And so it can properly allocate the resources to make sure that the body and the brain get enough time to heal and repair. So part of it is the figuring out the consistency as best we can instead of trying to. I always say to people, would you say that you were eating fast food and take out all these things during the week and then cook your meals and eat healthy at home on the weekend and tell me you were a healthy eater? So that's one of the myths. Another one is a lot of people say, oh, well, I didn't sleep well last night. I need to go to bed early tonight. Going to bed early and disrupting that schedule can actually make your sleep worse because now your body doesn't know when to feel tired. Now, I'm not saying if you didn't sleep at all that night, that you might not need a nap or to rest. But if we eat dinner at 7 o'clock every night, we start to get hungry around 6:30 because our body knows when to expect to eat. If we go to bed around the same time every night, our body can start to adjust the chemicals that it needs and the way that our body works to know when it's time to fall asleep. But if sometimes we go to bed at 9 and sometimes 11 and sometimes 1 in the morning, now our brain doesn't know when to feel tired and when to shut off. And it can make that confusing. The other big myth that I have to tell people about is what we use our bed for. So if I said to you, I'm going to go to the movies, I'm going to go to the cinema, what snack am I most likely going to get? What would you think of?
Or popcorn.
Right, movies, popcorn. I want your brain to say bed, sleep. Not this is where I process, where I study, where I watch TV, where I think, where I eat. So when we're doing all these things that aren't sleep in our bed, our brain gets confused. Should I be awake right now? Should I be asleep right now? That's why so many people fall asleep on the couch, get up 2 hours later, get in bed and can't fall asleep because their brain thinks that the couch is where they sleep and the bed is where they solve the world's problems. So that's where we have to figure out, okay, let's retrain our brain on what the bed is for. That's why those 15 to 20 minutes before we go to bed, that's when we take that notepad and pen and write down our to-do list for the next day, where we write down all the thoughts racing through our brain. So we're giving the brain the option and the opportunity to do all of that, but then we put it on the nightstand and we get in bed. And if our mind is still racing, we get out of bed, we write more down and get back in bed. So just like you take a puppy and you keep putting it outside to house train it, you're teaching your brain that it doesn't get to go in bed anymore. And so now you're not taking your troubles to sleep with you. So it's just little things like that. Like if you find yourself, you're lying in bed and you know you're not going to fall asleep, get out of bed. Most people will lay there and be like, well, I just need to rest. I need to will myself to sleep. Have you ever had a night where you knew you really needed to sleep and then you couldn't? So it's better to get out of bed and do something boring. Empty the dishwasher, fold the laundry, something like that until you feel tired, and then you get back in bed. We strengthen that movie's popcorn. We strengthen that connection, bed, sleep.
So you
So
teach,
many more, but those are a few.
well, you also teach things like sleep window. What's a sleep window?
So a sleep window is one of the core strategies that is used in something called CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it's the number one gold standard to help people to sleep better. It actually outperforms medications and all of these other pieces. I'll give you the short version here. And then if folks want to dive deeper, they can watch my TEDx talk that really goes through more in depth. But how a sleep window works is you first figure out how much sleep you're getting on a typical night. So take the average of your 7 days, weekdays and weekends, come up with a number. If for any reason it's less than 5 hours average a night, your new number's 5. But for everyone else, maybe it's only 6 hours. That's okay. We can start there. And don't count time in bed, that like the reading and everything else, only time is sleep. So then we get that number and we're going to figure out, okay, say I'm getting 6 hours of sleep right now. I'm going to pick a 6 hour window to get that sleep. I'm helping myself to become more efficient with my sleep. And so what we do is we work backwards. What's the earliest that you're going to have to wake up across your 7 day week? Maybe it's 6 a.m. 2 days a week because you have a workout class. So you take the wake time, you take that number, say 6 hours, and then you work backwards. That's how you determine the window. So 6 a.m., 6 hours, that means a 12 midnight bedtime. And if midnight feels too late, I can switch it to 11 to 5 or 10 to 4, but I'm not going to stretch the window and pad it with more time. I have to start with reality and then I'll expand it. And so you do that for 7 days. That means if midnight's your bedtime, you don't get in bed at 11 to read. You can read on the couch or the chair, but you're not doing it in bed. And when midnight rolls around, that's not when you start reading. That's when you put the book down and turn off the lights. And your body starts to learn, okay, I'm getting 6 hours and I have this 6 hour window. And if I don't sleep during those 6 hours, I'm not going to get to sleep. So it starts retraining your body on when to be tired and sleep. That's why even if you wake up 3 times that night, you still get out of bed when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. You do that for 7 days, and then we get to expand. So we're checking. We want to be falling asleep within 10 to 15 minutes, sleeping straight through the night, minus the bladder break, and waking up and feeling rested and not needing the nap. And if that is you, you've hit your ideal sleep spot. If you're finding that you're still tired, now we're going to grow and expand that window by 15 minutes. And we do that every week. So 12 to 6 becomes 11:45 to 6, and then 11:30 to 6. And we do that until we hit that sweet spot. And that's exactly what our body and brain needs for us to be our healthiest.
So how can someone like experiment with their own sleep window without making things total nightmare?
So the first trick would be that, whether you're wearing the tracking devices, whether you just have a general sense of how much sleep you're getting, figure out across your 7 days, what's the average? So if we talked right now, even without looking at metrics, you could probably say to me, okay, some nights I get 7 hours, some nights I get 8, some nights I get 6.5. You could probably average and come up with a number. And so we don't want to range, not 6 to 7 hours. We'll pick the middle, say 6.5. So if someone figures out that number, figures out their wake time, sets up that window for a week, they can do that and start to see for themselves. Okay, you know what? I see that I get in bed, but it takes me about 30 minutes to fall asleep every night. So then that person would adjust and say, all right, I should probably go to bed 30 minutes later. It's not that it's going to always take me 30 minutes to fall asleep, because that's what people do. Then they're like, oh, well, it's taking me an hour to fall asleep. I need to go to bed an hour earlier so that I can fall asleep sooner. But your body isn't tired yet. And so that's the difference, is that if they're figuring out how much you're getting, when you want to wake up, what you want that window to be, we need to just pick a set schedule and do that for an entire 7 days and look at the patterns. Is there a night that I maybe had a drink with dinner and that impacted it? Or I ate a lot of sugar today, or caffeine, or maybe I went to bed a little bit later and I actually didn't wake up as many times. So just like we squeeze the air out of the Ziploc bag, maybe we need to squeeze out those awakenings and go to bed a little bit later. So that's where you can start to make those adjustments, but we don't want to be so variable with our sleep that our body doesn't know when to feel tired.
So, like, what's one or two sleep triggers that help the body recognize it's time for bed versus I'm going to get on my phone and just doom scroll?
So I love that you use that word, because I always talk about sleep triggers, and there's a few things. So one, light universally impacts everything with our sleep. Our eyes perceive light and it sends messages to this part of the brain. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but we'll call it the sleep switch. So it says, it's light out, be awake. It's dark out, be asleep. And so what used to happen is as the sun would start to set and we would have dusk, and then people's bodies would start to be triggered to produce chemicals like melatonin. Melatonin spikes in your body about 4 to 6 hours before you go to bed. And it starts to make us feel sleepy and adjust the body. So when we're on our phones, now the sun isn't setting because it's so bright. So that's why we want to be turning down the overhead lights, have the side lamps, put our phones in night mode, start having it be getting darker so that our body can naturally produce the chemicals that it needs and have those triggers. We also are very set based on routine. So those associations. So think about what we do for children. We have a whole bedtime routine. Wash your face, brush your teeth, read a story, say your prayers, whatever the family does, right? This whole process. And as adults, we don't do that. We just climb in bed and doom scroll. So our phone becomes the only trigger. And so that's why we need to have other things. So, yes, wash your face, brush your teeth, but are you doing some stretching? Are you doing some breathing? You can read as long as it's outside of bed. What are the 3 or 4 things that you're doing that don't involve just being on your phone? That if you do it every single night, when you start doing that process, you start to feel tired and sleepy. I have a lot of new parents do that because then when they wake up with their kid and now it's the middle of the night and they have trouble falling back to sleep, you start the process over again and your body will be able to unwind faster because it knows, oh, I know this one. Popcorn, it's time to watch that movie.
So you also do consulting work that focuses on like workplace effectiveness,
Mhm.
burnout. What patterns do you see in like high pressure jobs that kill our sleep?
Such a great question. I think when I'm talking about stress levels and burnout, I typically describe it as the demands are exceeding the resources available. So if you think of like somebody that has a stress fracture, right? There was so much pressure and it caused it to break. So if we have constant demand for our time, constant demand for our energy, well, there's only so much to go around. And so when that's happening every single day and we never have time to refill it, think about, okay, everybody has their phones and their devices. So if the phone is charging down to 0% and you plug it in for about 5 minutes, so you have about 5 to 10% of battery life, you have enough to make the phone call, but you got to plug it in again and got to plug it in again. Sometimes we have to plug it in long enough that the battery can fully come back up to 100% battery so it can last longer. So many people aren't giving themselves that opportunity to rest to actually recharge the battery. And so what I'm finding here is that for a lot of these individuals, again, not realizing that positive things can cause stress. And there's so many things that are demanding our energy and our resources. Even some folks have said to me recently, why did I sign up for that pickleball league? Now I have one more thing I have to do. And so it's the next thing and the next thing. And then, especially for individuals that may have things happening cognitively and within their brain where it's using even more resources, then they might tire faster or fatigue faster. So we need to make sure that we are protecting that rest time and that we're seeing sleep as the secret superpower that we all have access to instead of the thing that we deprioritize to try to cram one more thing in. When we're exhausted, we're not going to be productive. We're just going to be busy.
So you also wrote about work underload, like being underutilized. How
Mhm.
does that show up and contribute to anxiety?
It's a really great question. So many people need to have that sense of why, that sense of purpose, or that sense of meaning. And even somebody, I was working with an individual a number of years ago, and their job was to do the brakes on an assembly line. And for a while, it just felt very mundane. And then they were able to reframe the way they thought about it as, you know what? This is so important because every car that they get, I could save their life with the brakes. And so for many people, it's we either are so focused on, I need to be busy because that shows that I have worth and that I'm productive. Again, busy versus, but for a lot of folks, it's having that sense of why and that sense of accomplishment. And so if you're just sitting around and you're not very busy, one, your mind can wander. And so then we start focusing on things that may not be helpful and we start to stress, or it's like, well, am I good enough to do this? Or why am I not being trusted with that? Sometimes people have that little voice that makes them doubt themselves, or it doesn't feel satisfying. And they're like, what's the point? I'm just going to show up every day and punch the time. So we need to have enough of a sense of purpose that helps us to feel value within ourselves.
Now, so what are patterns you see repeatedly in high performers and neurodivergent adults, especially that hurt their performance?
So I think that many times it's not giving themselves permission that their brain is going to process things differently. Different doesn't always mean wrong. And so I see a lot of people either trying to hide the difference and or trying to act in certain ways or put certain expectations on themselves. And there are going to be some things that they're going to be faster at and some things that they're going to be slower at. Or the fact that their brain may process or think differently, or that they may, some people were thinking, oh, well, I'm so distracted, but that may play a role in creativity or in brainstorming. So I think sometimes it's embracing the understanding of, okay, there are certain things that I need to do differently, but that can make me more effective. It's just like the opposite, people just giving themselves permission to find balance, or like the idea of planned neglect, where there's so many things and we know we're not going to be able to accomplish everything. So let's choose what we're not going to accomplish. Let's plan what we're going to neglect so that we still feel like we have some control over it instead of feeling like everything is out of our control. But also, what I find is that that's where, coming back to the sleep piece, is that when we're sleeping well, then we do see better in terms of the focus, the attention, the concentration, the way that we can balance our emotions and have that emotion regulation, certain things that may trigger in terms of even just certain textures or contexts and other things, we're going to be less stimulated when we're able to get full rest, because then the brain can truly have a full reset and restart.
So, what's one simple daytime practice that can improve sleep tonight?
Oh, there's so many things. I think that one of the things that I think plays a role with the stress and the sleep is doing a quick daily check in with yourself about your stress level. And what I mean by that, so I'll have you play along with me for a second. So we're having a great conversation, we're laughing, we're smiling, we think we were perfectly relaxed. But if you take your shoulders and you put them up to your ears as high as you can, play along, tighter, as tight as you can, tight, 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 and then drop it. Okay. Now, when you roll it out, you're like, oh, I had a little bit of tension there. And so the tension doesn't mean that there was a threat. It could be the way that you were sitting to driving or typing or maybe picking up and moving things around the office. The point is that our body is going to hold tension from all the different things we've done throughout the day. A lot of people will hold it in their hips and their stomach from having to sit at a desk, for instance. And so our brain is constantly scanning to check and see how tense are her muscles, how fast is he breathing, how quickly is the heart beating. And when it's at a certain threshold, then our brain isn't going to let us relax because it thinks that there's a threat. It's triggering that fight or flight. And sleep is considered a vulnerable state. So our body isn't going to let us sleep and rest if it thinks that there's a threat. So doing that exercise, the tightening and releasing of the muscles through the whole body, something called PMR, progressive muscle relaxation. When you overly tighten a muscle and release it, it helps to elongate the muscle, relieve the tension. And when we do that head to toe, the body relaxes, our breathing pace slows down, and the brain thinks, oh, there's less stress, there's less threat, and now it will let the body rest and relax. So we're preparing ourselves throughout the day, but we're also becoming more aware of what's happening within our body, what's triggering us, so that we can stop it when it starts instead of having to get through an entire day and then do all the unpacking all at once.
So, for the person who has the crazy schedule, what sleep support strategies do you suggest that don't require like a perfect routine?
Sure. I mean, so there are a number of things, right? So I think if we can have as consistent of a wake time as possible, it's a great place to start, because no matter when we go to bed, our body is going to have a better sense of how much it has to work with to allocate the resources. I think part of it is setting up as best of a bedroom environment as we can. We talk about the cold, dark, quiet, comfortable. For the person that's traveling on the road and such, you can still make your hotel room the same. You can take the clip hangers out of the closet and clip the curtains together so the light doesn't come through. You can turn the temperature down on the thermostat and make it a little bit cooler, because that will trigger the body, because we drop in temperature when we sleep at night. We can do things like preparing for bed to have that consistent bedtime routine so that no matter when we're going to bed, our brain knows that it's time to rest and it will be able to shut off and fall asleep faster. And we can be better in charge of our devices and our technology. So, for instance, putting it in that night mode, not just bringing the brightness down, but have it be the black background with the white lettering. That's going to emit less light at night and let our brain start to be triggered for that. Let's make sure that when our alarm goes off in the morning, we're not hitting the snooze button.
Hmm.
Snooze button is terrible for your sleep, because what's happening is that 8 or 9 minutes isn't enough time to get back into restful sleep for your body or your brain, it's literally like eating empty calories. I tell people they had their sleep Skittles before they got out of bed. It's better to literally set your alarm for 10 to 15 minutes later so that your body and brain has longer time to heal and repair. It takes, before we wake up in the morning, our body, it's about 2 to 3 hours to prepare to wake us up before we actually wake up. When we hit that snooze button, we're saying, just kidding, didn't really need you to wake up yet. And so now it can take up to 60 minutes for our brain to get where it needs to go. So little things like that, like don't set your alarm earlier so you can hit the snooze button. I get it. It's nice to say no to something in your life, but that's not the one to do. So it's just little tweaks like that that we can do to help take back control over our sleep, even if we can't have the perfect schedule.
So, what do you wish employers, schools, and health systems understood about sleep and anxiety?
Mhm. So much there. I will say that I think that, especially in the last number of years, people are starting, as we say, to wake up about poor sleep. They're starting to understand that it's not okay to just be tired because that for employers, it can reduce productivity. Organizations are losing over $400 billion a year because of the sleep problems of their employees. So, when we're letting our employees get the right amount of sleep, we're actually seeing productivity increase and errors and mistakes and accidents and things go down. For schools, it's understanding the school start times and the way that the circadian rhythm changes for children from being young children to adolescence to young adulthood. I mean, so once children hit the age of puberty, their circadian rhythm switches, and most of them don't get tired until later. That's why your teens aren't getting tired until midnight or 1 in the morning. But then so they're not falling asleep till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then they're up at 6 to be at school for 7. So sometimes it's understanding how the body works, how sleep works, understanding that being rested actually makes you healthier and more productive. So there's so many things that is something we're seeing more in the healthcare systems now, where they're putting in place like the amount of time that doctors and residents and trainees and nurses and such need to get their sleep. And they're starting to adopt more of those same rules that we're seeing with like airline pilots and marine engineers and those kind of things as well.
So, if one of my listeners is hearing this on another foggy brain day, what's one message you want them to carry away?
But you said if they're hearing this on a what? Sorry, I cut
If
out.
they're on another foggy brain day,
Yes. I think the first message is that if not today, tomorrow. And what I mean by that is if you don't sleep well on one night, or you have a day where you're feeling that stress, that doesn't automatically mean that all is lost. If you don't sleep well one night, your body is going to have you sleep the next night because it needs sleep. It's a core natural thing that happens. If you're having a day where you're experiencing significant stress, your body will do what it can to help to regulate and to do that. And that I think the other key piece is that you can take back control over it. It doesn't mean that you all of a sudden have to try to self medicate, that you have to, there are strategies out there and there are people out there with the training and the support that can help you do that. Seeking that help and support isn't a weakness, it's a strength. And there's so many opportunities now and so many resources instead of just feeling hopeless or feeling like, well, this is just what I'm stuck with and it's never going to get better.
okay, final question. Where can people find you, your resources, if they want to go deeper into getting better sleep?
So my website is the best place to start. So it's my name, melissamalanik.com. I have a video library with close to 200 videos, TED Talks, free guides that people can download. If they want to go to the consultation tab and put it in and say that they heard me through your podcast, they can get a free 15-minute consultation that's included. Obviously, social media. So Instagrams of Dr. Melissa Milanak, LinkedIn, and such. But many resources on there. My book's coming out in the next few months, so people will be able to log on and sign up for things with that as well. So the website and Instagram will probably be the best places.
Dr. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I will wish all your listeners sweet dreams.